The desert stretched endlessly, its golden dunes shimmering under the relentless gaze of twin suns. This world, barren and harsh, was as unforgiving as it was beautiful. Life here was a test of endurance, a struggle for survival amid the swirling sands and blistering winds. But among the many stories buried in the desert's vastness, one stood out, a tale of two lives entwined by fate. She had no name, or if she did, it had long been stripped from her. The alien woman bore a delicate frame, her translucent skin shimmering faintly under the sun, glinting with a soft, pearlescent hue. Her almond-shaped eyes held depths of sorrow too profound to speak of, and her silvery hair hung limp against her shoulders, matted with the grit of her captivity. To the desert traders, she was nothing more than property, a rare find to be bought, sold, and exploited for her otherworldly beauty and presumed fragility. Bound by chains of reinforced alloy, she trudged behind a caravan of merchants. The weight of her servitude was heavier than the cargo they hauled across the dunes. The traders barked commands, their voices sharp as the crack of the whips they carried. She obeyed without protest. Resistance was futile, and she had learned long ago that defiance only brought more suffering. The caravan camped at night near an outcropping of jagged rocks, their flickering fires illuminating a stark scene of human greed and alien despair. The traders laughed boisterously, exchanging boasts of their exploits and the wealth they expected to gain from selling her to the highest bidder in the distant oasis city of Kalahim. They spoke of her strange origins in hushed tones, speculating about the distant star she had come from, the technology she must have known, and the secrets she might hold. None of them cared to ask her, nor did they care to treat her as anything more than an exotic commodity. Among the traders, one figure stood apart. A man named Corin, his weathered face and calloused hands marking him as a man of the desert. Unlike the others, he avoided their crude jokes and drunken revelry, sitting apart from the group with a quiet, watchful gaze. Corin was not one of them, not truly. He had joined the caravan out of necessity, seeking safe passage across the treacherous sands after losing his own mounts to a sudden sandstorm. As the night deepened, Corin's eyes strayed to the alien woman. He saw her huddled against the cold, her chains clinking softly as she adjusted her position to shield herself from the biting wind. There was something in her posture, in the hollow resignation of her expression, that stirred a deep unease in him. The traders treated her like an object, but Corin saw a person, a sentient being with thoughts, feelings, and a story of her own. When dawn broke, the caravan resumed its journey. The alien woman stumbled as the traders yanked her forward, and Corin's frown deepened. He kept his distance, watching silently, his mind wrestling with a growing sense of moral conflict. He had always believed in minding his own business. Survival in the desert often depended on it. But something about this situation gnawed at his conscience. It was 3 days into the journey when the decision became unavoidable. The caravan was ambushed by a group of bandits, their sleek, sand-colored skimmers emerging from the dunes with blinding speed. Chaos erupted as the traders scrambled to defend their cargo, shouting orders and firing crude energy weapons. The bandits, well-armed and ruthless, showed no mercy, cutting through the defenses with precision. In the chaos, the alien woman was forgotten. Her chains were still intact, but the lock securing them to the caravan had been severed in the melee. She crouched behind a pile of crates, her wide eyes darting between the combatants. Corin, crouched behind a makeshift barricade, spotted her. As the bandits began looting the fallen caravan, he made a split-second decision. Dodging stray energy blasts, he sprinted toward her. "Come with me if you want to live," he said, his voice urgent but firm. She hesitated, her expression a mixture of confusion and mistrust. But something in his tone convinced her to move. Corin smashed the lock on her chains with the butt of his blaster, freeing her wrists. Together, they fled into the dunes, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Hours passed before they stopped to rest, the twin suns bearing down on them mercilessly. The alien woman was silent, her expression guarded. Corin offered her water from his canteen, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. "Do you understand me?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded slowly, her voice soft and melodic when she finally spoke. "I understand." Corin was startled by the clarity of her words. He had expected broken phrases or gestures, but her speech, though accented, was fluent. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, her gaze lowering. I do not remember. Her response sent a pang of sympathy through him. Then I'll call you something else, for now. What about Ilara? It means starlight in my language. A flicker of something, gratitude perhaps, crossed her face. Ilara, she repeated, as if testing the name. Thank you. Their journey together was far from easy. The desert was an unforgiving place, and the bandits had stripped Corin of most of his supplies. But he was resourceful, and with Ilara's help, they managed to survive. She proved to be more than the fragile creature the traders had assumed. Though her physical strength was limited, her intelligence and keen observation made her an invaluable companion. As days turned into weeks, Corin began to learn more about her. Ilara spoke of her home, a distant world of crystalline forests and glowing seas. She had been taken from her people by raiders, sold into slavery, and transported across countless light years to this desolate planet. Her voice trembled as she recounted her story, but Corin listened without interruption, his respect for her growing with each passing day. In return, Corin shared fragments of his own life. He spoke of his upbringing in a small desert village, his years as a wandering merchant, and the hardships that had brought him to this point. Their conversations created a bond between them, one forged in the crucible of their shared struggle for survival. One night, as they sat around a small fire, Ilara turned to Corin. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Corin hesitated, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. Ilara studied him for a moment, then nodded. Not many would have done the same. Corin shrugged, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe not. But I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." As the days turned into weeks, their journey brought them closer to the edge of the desert. But their trials were far from over. The traders and bandits were not the only dangers they faced, and the harsh environment continued to test their resilience. Still, in the midst of the hardships, a fragile hope began to bloom. Together, they were stronger than they had been apart, and as their bond deepened, so too did their determination to overcome the odds. Their journey pressed onward, the days blending into one another under the unrelenting sun. Ilara walked with a renewed purpose now, her steps more confident than they had been in years of servitude. Freed from her chains, she began to rediscover pieces of herself, shards of a shattered identity slowly coming together. Corin noticed the change, though he said little about it. He simply observed, offering quiet support when needed and giving her the space to reclaim what had been taken from her. The desert, however, was merciless. Their supplies dwindled rapidly, and water became a precious commodity. Corin had lived his entire life in these harsh conditions, and his resourcefulness was the only thing keeping them alive. He taught Ilara how to identify water sources hidden beneath the sand, how to recognize plants that stored moisture, and how to navigate by the stars. She learned quickly, her sharp mind absorbing every detail. One evening, as they rested in the shadow of a craggy rock formation, Ilara looked up at the stars. Her silvery hair caught the moonlight, giving her an ethereal glow. "On my world," she said softly, "the skies were always alive. The lights danced and shimmered like ribbons of color. Here, they seem still." Corin, sitting nearby, glanced at her. "The desert has a way of making everything feel frozen. Like time doesn't move." Ilara turned to him, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint light of the stars. "It moves, Corin. Even here. It's just slower, quieter." Her words lingered in his mind long after they had fallen silent. There was a depth to her perspective, a quiet wisdom born from years of suffering and survival. It humbled him, and he found himself looking at her with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. As they traveled further north, the desert began to change. The dunes gave way to rocky terrain, and the air grew cooler at night. They encountered signs of life, small, scrappy plants clinging to existence, and the occasional sighting of desert wildlife. It was a relief to both of them, though it also meant they were nearing settlements. Corin's unease grew with every step. The traders would surely be searching for them, and the closer they got to civilization, the greater the risk of being recognized. He knew how ruthless the desert merchants could be, and he feared what would happen if Alara fell back into their hands. One afternoon, as they approached a dry ravine, Corin spotted movement in the distance. He raised his hand, signaling for Alara to stop. "Stay low," he whispered, his voice tense. Alara crouched beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "What is it?" "Riders," Corin said grimly. "Probably scouts." The two of them scrambled into the ravine, pressing themselves against the rocky walls. They waited in silence, the sound of approaching hooves growing louder. Corin gripped his blaster tightly, his jaw set. The riders, 3 of them, passed by without noticing the pair. Corin exhaled slowly, but his relief was short-lived. "They're heading toward the settlements," he said. "They'll have word of us soon." Alara's expression darkened. "What do we do?" Corin hesitated. They couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they would need to face the threat head-on. But the thought of putting Alara at risk filled him with dread. "We keep moving," he said finally. "But we'll have to be careful. Stay off the main paths. Avoid anyone who might recognize us." Their pace quickened, urgency driving them forward. They traveled through the night, using the cover of darkness to their advantage. Alara's endurance surprised Corin. Despite her delicate appearance, she kept up with him, her determination unyielding. The following day, they reached the outskirts of a small settlement nestled against a rocky cliff. It was a modest place, with a handful of weathered buildings and a communal well. Corin knew they needed supplies, but entering the settlement was a gamble. "We'll be quick," he said as they approached. "Just enough to get us to the next water source." Alara nodded, pulling her hood low to conceal her face. Inside the settlement, the air was thick with tension. The residents eyed them warily, their gazes lingering on Corin's rugged appearance and Alara's hidden features. Corin traded a few items for water and provisions, keeping his interactions brief. As they prepared to leave, a gruff voice called out from behind them. "You there! Stop!" Corin's hand instinctively moved to his blaster, but he didn't draw it. He turned slowly, his heart pounding. A burly man stood behind them, flanked by 2 others. Their rough clothing and weathered faces marked them as desert traders. "You match the description of a pair we're looking for," the man said, his eyes narrowing. "Where's the girl?" Corin's grip on his weapon tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's gaze shifted to Alara, and suspicion flickered in his eyes. "Show your face." Alara hesitated, but Corin stepped between her and the traders. "Back off," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The man smirked, reaching for his own weapon. "Brave of you, but foolish." Before he could draw, Corin moved. His blaster came up in a blur, and a single shot rang out, striking the man's weapon and sending it flying. Chaos erupted as the other traders lunged forward, but Alara moved too, her instincts sharp and swift. She grabbed a discarded metal rod, using it to deflect a blow aimed at Corin. The fight was brief but intense. Corin's skill with his blaster and Alara's quick thinking turned the tide in their favor. The traders, battered and humiliated, retreated with curses and threats. Breathing heavily, Corin turned to Alara. "You all right?" She nodded, her expression resolute. "We can't stay here." They fled the settlement, their supplies in tow. The encounter had shaken them both, but it also solidified something unspoken between them. They were a team now, bound not just by necessity, but by trust and a shared determination to survive. As the days wore on, the bond between Corin and Alara deepened. Their conversations grew more personal, their silences more comfortable. Corin found himself marveling at Alara's resilience, while she grew to admire his unwavering sense of justice. But the desert was not done testing them. Rumors of a bounty on their heads began to spread, drawing the attention of mercenaries and bounty hunters. Each day brought new dangers, and the stakes grew higher with every step they took. Through it all, they clung to each other, their connection a beacon of hope in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. As the rumors of their escape grew and the bounty on their heads increased, Corin and Alara found themselves pursued by threats both seen and unseen. The desert's emptiness now felt like a stage, where every shadow might conceal an enemy, and every gust of wind carried the whispers of those hunting them. Still, they pressed on, moving through the uncharted terrain far from the caravan routes and settlements. Days turned into weeks, and survival became a delicate dance. The sun was merciless during the day, its heat searing, while the nights were bitterly cold. Corin taught Alara how to navigate these extremes, using the natural rhythm of the desert to their advantage. He spoke of the desert like a living thing, with its own moods and secrets, and Alara listened intently, soaking up his wisdom. But the desert's secrets were not always kind. One morning, after a restless night of travel, Alara noticed a strange buzzing in the air. It was faint at first, like the hum of distant machinery. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Corin froze, tilting his head to listen. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the unmistakable whine of an aerial skimmer. "Scouts," Corin muttered, his expression darkening. He scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes searching for movement. "We need to move. Now." They scrambled to pack their meager supplies and began climbing a nearby ridge, hoping to find cover among the jagged rocks. The sound grew louder, and soon, a sleek, sand-colored skimmer appeared in the distance, its streamlined frame glinting in the sunlight. Corin pulled Alara behind an outcropping, his breath steady despite the tension in his posture. "Stay low," he whispered. The skimmer passed overhead, its searchlights sweeping across the desert floor. Alara held her breath, her heart pounding as the light came dangerously close to their hiding spot. But the skimmer continued on, its operators oblivious to their presence. When the sound of the engine finally faded, Corin exhaled slowly. "They're getting closer," he said grimly. "We need a better plan." Alara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "If they're searching for us, then we need to become something they're not looking for." Corin frowned. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the vast desert around them. "They're expecting a fugitive and an alien. But what if we weren't? What if we looked like something they wouldn't think twice about?" Corin considered her words, a plan beginning to form in his mind. It was risky, but it might just work. "We'll need disguises," he said, "and a place to lay low." The nearest settlement was a few days' journey away, a small mining outpost known for its rough inhabitants and lax laws. It was the kind of place where questions weren't asked, as long as you had something to trade. They reached the outpost under the cover of darkness, their faces hidden beneath layers of fabric. The settlement was little more than a cluster of ramshackle buildings surrounding a central square, where miners and traders gathered to barter and brawl. Corin led Alara to a small, dimly lit shop run by a grizzled old man with a mechanical arm. The shop was cluttered with all manner of items, from spare parts to scavenged clothing. "What can I do for you?" the man asked, his voice gravelly. Corin placed a few pieces of scrap metal on the counter, salvage he had collected during their journey. "We need clothes and supplies," he said. "Something simple, nothing that'll draw attention." The shopkeeper eyed the scrap, then nodded. "You've got enough here for a few basics. Follow me." He led them to the back of the shop, where racks of clothing hung in disarray. Alara found a simple desert robe and a wide-brimmed hat, both designed to conceal her distinctive features. Corin chose a worn jacket and scarf, items that blended seamlessly with the rough-and-tumble aesthetic of the outpost. As they changed into their new disguises, Corin glanced at Alara. "You look different," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Less like someone being hunted," he said. "More like someone ready to fight back." Alara allowed herself a small smile. "Then it's a good disguise." Their new identities gave them a measure of freedom, but the threat of discovery still loomed. They kept to the edges of the outpost, avoiding unnecessary interactions. Corin used the time to gather information, listening for rumors about the traders and the bounty they had placed on Alara. It didn't take long to confirm his suspicions. The bounty had grown, attracting the attention of mercenaries and bounty hunters from across the desert. The traders were desperate to recover their property, and they had the resources to make life very difficult for anyone who got in their way. One night, as they sat in a small, rented room above a noisy tavern, Alara turned to Corin. "We can't keep running forever," she said. He looked at her, his expression weary but resolute. "I know. We need to turn this around," she continued, her voice firm. "If they want me so badly, Then maybe we can use that against them. Corin frowned. What are you suggesting? Ilara's eyes gleamed with determination. We draw them to us, but on our terms. Somewhere we can control the situation. It was a bold plan, and Corin knew it was dangerous. But Ilara was right. They couldn't keep running indefinitely. If they wanted to truly be free, they would need to confront their enemies head-on. Over the next few days, they began to prepare. Corin used his knowledge of the desert to identify a location that would give them the upper hand, a narrow canyon with limited entry points and plenty of cover. Ilara worked on creating a decoy, using scraps of metal and fabric to fashion a makeshift signal beacon that would lure their pursuers into the trap. When the preparations were complete, they set their plan into motion. The beacon was activated, its signal broadcasting a faint but unmistakable distress call. Then they waited, hidden among the rocks, their nerves taut with anticipation. The first group of bounty hunters arrived at dawn, their skimmers kicking up clouds of sand as they entered the canyon. Corin and Ilara watched from their vantage point, their hearts pounding. "Remember the plan," Corin whispered. Ilara nodded, her grip tightening on the blaster Corin had given her. As the bounty hunters dismounted, scanning the area for signs of their quarry, Corin and Ilara struck. Corin's sharpshooting skills took out their vehicles, disabling their ability to retreat. Ilara used her quick thinking and agility to outmaneuver the hunters, her every move calculated and precise. The battle was fierce, but Corin and Ilara's preparation gave them the upper hand. When the dust finally settled, the bounty hunters lay defeated, their weapons and supplies now in Corin and Ilara's possession. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. For the first time, they had turned the tide, proving that they were not helpless fugitives but a force to be reckoned with. As they stood together in the aftermath, Ilara looked at Corin, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and determination. "This isn't over," she said. Corin nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "No. But we're not running anymore." The canyon was silent now, save for the soft rustle of the desert wind carrying the echoes of their victory. Ilara and Corin moved quickly, scavenging what they could from the defeated bounty hunters. Among the supplies, they found energy packs, rations, and a small portable map projector, a useful tool for navigating the treacherous desert. Corin examined the projector, his brow furrowing as he activated it. The holographic map flickered to life, revealing the surrounding terrain in intricate detail. "This might be just what we need," he said, pointing to a marked location a few days' journey to the west. Ilara leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "It's a ruin," Corin explained. "Old structures from before this desert swallowed everything. If we can reach it, we might find shelter and answers." "Answers to what?" Ilara asked, her voice cautious. "To why they want you so badly," Corin said. "And maybe a way to stop them for good." Ilara hesitated, her eyes searching his face. She could see the determination in his expression, the spark of a plan taking shape. For so long, she had lived moment to moment, her only goal to survive another day. But Corin's resolve gave her hope that they could do more than survive. "All right," she said. "Let's go." The journey to the ruins was grueling. The desert seemed determined to test them at every turn, throwing sandstorms and scorching heat in their path. But the map projector proved invaluable, guiding them through the labyrinth of dunes and rocky outcroppings. On the third night, as they set up camp beneath the stars, Ilara sat beside Corin, her gaze fixed on the flickering firelight. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. Corin glanced at her, his expression curious. "About what?" "About why they want me," she said. "It's not just because I'm different. There's something more." He nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I've been wondering the same thing. The bounty they've put on you, it's too high for just one person. They're after something." Ilara hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small, crystalline device, its surface etched with intricate patterns. "This," she said, holding it out to him. Corin took the device, examining it closely. It pulsed faintly with an inner light, its surface warm to the touch. "What is it?" "It's a memory shard," Ilara explained. "It holds fragments of my people's knowledge. I managed to hide it before they took me." Corrin's grip tightened on the shard as realization dawned. This is what they're after, he said. They don't care about you, they care about what you know. Ilara's expression was pained, her voice barely a whisper. They want to use it to control my people. To exploit them the way they've exploited me. Corrin's jaw clenched, anger simmering beneath the surface. We're not going to let that happen, he said. We'll find a way to stop them. Their resolve strengthened, they continued their journey, each step bringing them closer to the ruins and the answers they sought. When they finally reached their destination, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and haunting. The ruins were massive, their towering structures carved from a dark, glass-like stone. The architecture was alien, its sweeping curves and intricate details unlike anything Corrin had ever seen. This place, Ilara whispered, her voice tinged with recognition. It feels familiar. Corrin glanced at her, his expression wary. Do you think your people built this? She shook her head, her silver hair catching the light. No. But whoever did, they were advanced. Far more advanced than the traders or the bounty hunters. As they explored the ruins, they discovered signs of ancient technology, consoles embedded in the walls, dormant machines coated in layers of dust. Ilara moved with a sense of purpose, her fingers brushing over the alien symbols etched into the stone. Here, she said, stopping in front of a large circular door. Its surface was adorned with glowing runes that pulsed faintly as she approached. Corrin studied the door, his hand resting on his blaster. Can you open it? Ilara nodded, her expression focused. I think so. The shard. It's a key. She placed the memory shard into a slot at the center of the door. The runes flared to life, and with a low rumble, the door began to slide open. Beyond it lay a vast chamber, its walls lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. This is incredible, Corrin murmured, his voice filled with wonder. Ilara stepped into the chamber, her eyes wide as she took in the sight. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it rested a larger shard, its glow bright and mesmerizing. The core memory, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. This is what they're after. Before Corrin could respond, a harsh voice echoed through the chamber. And now it belongs to us. They spun around to see a group of bounty hunters emerging from the shadows, their weapons trained on them. At their head was a tall, imposing figure clad in black armor, his face obscured by a visor. Hand over the shard, the leader demanded, his voice cold and mechanical. Corrin stepped in front of Ilara, his blaster drawn. You'll have to kill me first. The leader chuckled, a low, menacing sound. That can be arranged. A tense standoff ensued, the air crackling with anticipation. Corrin's mind raced, searching for a way out. Ilara, clutching the shard, glanced at the core memory on the pedestal. I can activate it, she whispered to Corrin. What will it do? He asked, his voice low. I don't know, she admitted. But it's our only chance. Corrin nodded, his trust in her absolute. Do it. Ilara stepped forward, raising the shard toward the pedestal. The bounty hunters shouted in alarm, but before they could react, the shard connected with the core memory. A surge of energy filled the chamber, the crystalline structures flaring to life. The bounty hunters were thrown back as a wave of light swept through the room, disarming them and rendering their technology useless. Corrin and Ilara stood in the center of the chaos, their bond stronger than ever. They had survived another trial, but they knew their journey was far from over. As the brilliant light subsided, the chamber returned to a quiet hum, leaving Corrin and Ilara standing amidst the stunned and incapacitated bounty hunters. The energy from the core memory had disarmed their pursuers, rendering their weapons useless and their skimmers inert outside the ruins. Corrin turned to Ilara, his face a mixture of awe and relief. What just happened? Ilara's eyes were wide, her expression one of disbelief and cautious hope. The core memory activated a defensive protocol. Whoever built this place, they designed it to protect itself. And now it's protecting us. The leader of the bounty hunters struggled to his feet, his visor cracked from the blast. You think this changes anything? He snarled. The traitors will keep coming. They'll never stop. Corrin raised his blaster, his voice cold. Not if we take the fight to them. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute. No. They want the knowledge in the core memory. We'll give them what they want, but on our terms. She approached the pedestal, placing her hands on the core memory. The crystalline structure pulsed in response, and a holographic display filled the chamber, showing a vast network of interconnected nodes, knowledge, technology, and secrets far beyond anything Corin had imagined. The memory shard was just a fragment, Ilara said. This is the full repository. It holds everything my people knew, including how to defend ourselves against those who would exploit us. Corin nodded, understanding her plan. We broadcast it, not just to the traders but to everyone. To the settlements, the villages, anyone who can stand against them. Ilara hesitated, the weight of the decision evident in her expression. Once it's out there, we can't control how it's used. But it's better than letting it be hoarded by the greedy. Corin placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. The choice is yours, Ilara. This is your legacy. She looked at him, finding strength in his unwavering support. Then, with a deep breath, she activated the core memory's broadcast function. The chamber filled with a resonant hum as the knowledge spread outward, carried by an invisible wave that reached across the desert and beyond. Outside the ruins, in settlements and cities, receivers buzzed to life, projecting the holographic display of the core memory. People gathered, their faces lit with wonder and curiosity as they absorbed the shared knowledge. The traders' grip on power began to crumble as the secrets they sought to control became a gift for all. Back in the chamber, Ilara turned to Corin, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. It's done, she said. Corin smiled, his admiration for her evident. You've given your people, and this world, a fighting chance. The two of them left the ruins, stepping into the cool desert night. The bounty hunters, stripped of their weapons and their mission, retreated into the shadows, their confidence shattered. As they walked, Ilara looked up at the stars, her silvery hair shimmering in the moonlight. For the first time in a long time, she said softly, I feel free. Corin glanced at her, his own heart lighter than it had been in years. What now? Ilara smiled, a spark of determination in her eyes. Now, we help rebuild what they tried to destroy. We help my people. We help yours. Together. Corin nodded, his place at her side clear. The desert had forged them into survivors, but now it would see them become something more, builders of a new future, one shaped by freedom, courage, and the bonds they had formed. And as they disappeared into the horizon, their silhouettes against the rising suns, the desert held their story in its endless sands, a story of resilience, redemption, and the unyielding power of hope.